Hello everyone and welcome back to the Austin Physio YouTube channel. Today's video we are going to be looking at how to improve hip mobility and function, because a lot of runners that we see in clinic suffer and experience tightness around the hips and pelvis. So when running, it is absolutely vital that we've got optimal mobility through the hips. When we're running, we're putting a lot of pressure up into the hip joint. So if you're tight through your hip flexors or around the back into the glutes or into the side of the glutes, after a while what can happen if you're doing a lot of endurance running or increasing your frequency is it can just start to feel quite sore, quite tight after. So the following routine we're going to have a look at today is all about moving your hips, stretching around and relaxing around the pelvis, and this is something that you can do after running. So the first exercise of the routine is all about getting movement into the hip. So what we want to aim for is about 10 circles in one direction and 10 circles in the opposite direction through both hips. If you're particularly struggling with the movement or it feels quite clicky, quite grindy as you're moving the hips, just reduce the range initially. So you want to build this up over time. So it's so important to get that full range of motion into your hip joints, particularly if you're doing a lot of running. We want to reduce stiffness, we want to reduce tightness, and we want to improve overall mobility into the hips. Once you've added in the mobility, and you've done this obviously after you've been running, what we can then start to look at is stretching into the hip joint. So one of the big muscles that we want to target initially, and of course it's quite hard to isolate specifically, so you're going to be stretching other muscles as well, is your piriformis muscle. So you're going to put the one foot over the top of the other knee, and you can either have the foot down if that's as much of a stretch, or you can pull it up towards you. So this is the beginner phase where you just let the leg drop out. Again, a lot of people want a deeper stretch, so you want to clasp the hands behind the knee, pull it up towards the chest, and we want to aim to hold this for 30 seconds on each side, and it's a really nice way to help improve that flexibility, that movement, and reduce any tightness. Once we've stretched the piriformis, we then want to look at trigger point releasing. So what's really common if you've got a lot of tightness around the hips and the pelvis is as you're palpating around, you'll find certain points that are particularly tender. So what you're going to do is you're going to find a point of tenderness or tightness or soreness. You're then going to add the tennis ball onto that point and roll the body over the tennis ball. You want to aim to hold this or take it to about an 8 out of 10 initially with the pressure, and then you want to hold it until that pain reduces and it feels a lot easier. So I would do this by working right the way around, because around the back of the glutes as well there's going to be specific points of tightness. So once you've stretched, you then want a trigger point release. After trigger point releasing, the next thing we want to move on to is you want to start to stretch around the front of the hips a little bit more. So the first option is just a pure hip flexor stretch, so you're leaning the body forward, stretching around the front of the legs, so you're holding in that position, aiming for 30 seconds on both sides, and this helps to improve range of motion, reduce tightness, improve flexibility through the hips, as it's really common if you're doing a lot of running that you're going to get tightness around the front of the hip. So you're going to hold that for 30 seconds. So you're holding that lovely stretch for 30 seconds. Next, we want to be a little bit more specific. So we want to start to target through the rectus femoris muscle, which is the upper attachment of the quadriceps. We've got 4 muscles. We're targeting the upper one that attaches into the hips. So you're going into a similar hip flexor stretch, but you're lifting up the back foot. So we've lifted it up through. You can see here as we're going into position, you're kind of putting the foot on the pillows and lunging forward. So what it does, it stretches a little bit more around the knee as well as the hip joint. So it just targets that rectus femoris a little bit more, which is so important for reducing tightness, improving flexibility. Next, we're going to look at another variation of the piriformis stretch. So you can either have the body up or you can drop it down. So we've got 2 variations here. So this is really nice to open up through the front of the hip, stretching around the back of the glutes. Again, we want to aim for 30 seconds on each side, and then we're swapping over. So again, you can hold it here if that's enough of a stretch, or you can push the stretch a little bit more like I was showing. So you're going to have the leg in front of you, One side will typically be a little bit easier to stretch than the other, and then you want to drop the body weight down, so you want to stretch down into that piriformis. Once you've held that for 30 seconds on each side, it's also really important to stretch a little bit into the back if you're thinking about flexibility through the hips. So we're going to go back into a child's pose. So you're going to let the legs relax out, and you're going to gently push the body back to stretch down into the back and also into the glutes, into the hips, to reduce that tightness. So again, it's really nice after running just to decompress, relax through this area. Of course, you can add in our lower back routine as well, but this is just targeting around the pelvis. And then you want to stretch across into the glutes. You're going to pull the leg across the body. You should feel it into the side of the glutes as you're stretching across. So you want 30 seconds on one side, 30 seconds on the opposite side, and again, potentially adding this in after every time you run, or at least, twice a week to stretch through the muscles.